Who raised you more, your parents, your grandparents, or someone else?
My brother told the only woman I've ever loved that I didn't see her that way. Just said it, plain as day, with that smug tone he always uses when he's about to twist the knife. I didn't find out until much later, of course, when the damage had already been done and the story had already been rewritten in someone else's voice. But when I first found out, I swear I didn't even get mad. I just felt cold, like someone flipped a switch inside me, like my body knew before my mind could catch up that this wasn't a small thing I could ever forgive. I met Sophie at a leadership retreat my company made me attend, one of those long weekends packed with icebreakers and awkward group projects where everyone pretends to care about synergy. She was with the event organizers, someone on the operations side, and she wasn't the kind of person who tried to be interesting, she just was. I don't usually let people in quickly. I've always been the kind of person who keeps others at arm's length, not because I think I'm better than anyone, but because people have a way of disappointing you the second you let your guard down. But with Sophie, it felt different. Like maybe for once, I didn't have to protect myself. We started talking the first night during a late group dinner, and we ended up sitting on the patio for over 4 hours after everyone else left, talking about things I don't even tell people I've known for years. I didn't expect anything from it. I definitely wasn't rushing to label whatever it was that was growing between us, but it was real. And I hadn't felt that in a long, long time. I told Jason about her a week or so after I got back. Just casually, in conversation, the way you tell your brother something new is happening in your life. I said I met someone. Nothing serious yet, but there's something there. And he did that thing he always does, smirked like it was a joke. Said, "Oh yeah? A woman this time." I laughed it off because I didn't feel like defending myself that night. Jason's always been the kind of guy who needs to dominate the room, even if it means stepping on people to do it. He's charming, the kind of charming that gets him free drinks and fast forgiveness, and he's always hated not being the center of someone's attention. He asked to meet her. Said it like he was just being curious, like he wanted to check in and see who's messing with my sister's heart. It sounded like concern, but it didn't feel like it. Still, I agreed. I wasn't suspicious yet. I should have been. God, I should have been. We met up for dinner a week later, just the three of us. Jason was on his best behavior, all smiles and subtle flirtation, not enough to be obvious, but just enough that I saw Sophie light up in ways I hadn't seen before. I told myself I was imagining it, that my insecurities were just playing tricks on me. That I was reading into things because this thing with Sophie mattered, and I was scared of losing it before it had even begun. I didn't ask her about it afterward because I didn't want to come off controlling or paranoid. I've always prided myself on being chill, on not playing the jealous card. I've seen too many people ruin good things that way. But the following week, everything changed. Sophie pulled back. At first, it was just slower responses to texts. Then she started canceling plans. The usual excuses, work stuff, being tired, family obligations. I waited it out. Gave her space. But one night, after another canceled dinner, I finally just asked. I said, "Are you okay? Did I do something?" And she didn't answer right away. She looked down at her hands, then up at me, and I'll never forget what she said. She said, "I talked to Jason. After dinner." Her voice was quiet, like she was embarrassed. I asked him if you were into me. He said, "You'd never see me that way. That I shouldn't take it personally. That you don't really date." I sat there, staring at her, trying to process whether she was serious or just messing with me. But her face told me everything. She believed it. She truly believed it. And in that moment, something broke in me. Because it wasn't just that Jason had lied, it was how easily Sophie accepted his version of me. How quick she was to toss aside what we had, what we were building, because my brother, my own damn brother, said a few smooth words in her ear. I didn't say anything that night. I didn't argue. I didn't try to win her back. I just nodded and said, "Okay." She looked confused, maybe expecting me to fight. But I didn't. I couldn't. I walked out, got in my car, and drove home in silence. That night, I deleted our entire message thread. Every picture. Every note. Every damn voicemail. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because I needed to feel like I had control over something. Because watching someone choose someone else over you, based on a lie, makes you question every word you ever said to them. I didn't tell Jason I knew. I didn't confront him. I didn't rage or call him out or try to fix anything. I just stopped answering. Stopped replying. Stopped giving either of them access to me. I didn't owe them a dramatic exit or an explanation. And here's where I want to ask you something, not just rhetorically, but really ask. If someone does that to you, if your own brother crushes the only real thing you've had in years just to take it for himself, do you forgive that? Or do you go quiet and make sure they never forget what they did? Because I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just disappeared. But if they thought I was done, they didn't know me at all. And this? This was only the beginning. By the time I found out that Jason had slept with Sophie, I'd already pulled so far away from both of them emotionally that it didn't even feel like a new betrayal. It felt like the natural conclusion to a story I had been too foolish to see clearly from the beginning, the last predictable page of a book where I had mistaken foreshadowing for trust and tension for care. It came to me through someone who had no idea I'd been cut out of the loop entirely, someone who thought they were sharing a funny piece of gossip. A casual bomb dropped during a coffee run. Did you see that Jason's dating that girl you were always hanging out with? The one from the retreat? Sophie, right? She said it with that knowing tone, the kind people use when they think they're including you in a secret, not realizing they've just walked you into a funeral for a relationship you weren't even allowed to mourn. I didn't respond. Not right away. I smiled, tight, polite, practiced, and changed the subject so fast I almost got whiplash. Then I went home and sat on the edge of my bed with my phone in my hand for over an hour, staring at it, not because I didn't know what to do, but because deep down I already knew I was never going to confront either of them. I wasn't going to start a fight. I wasn't going to demand explanations or apologies or performances of guilt. I wasn't going to scream or sob or beg. I was going to do what I've always done when people show me exactly who they are. I was going to vanish so thoroughly that the only thing they'd have left of me would be the space I used to occupy. That night, I made a decision that would set the tone for everything that came after. I opened up every photo I had with Sophie, every stupid little inside joke we had saved in texts, every voice memo, every half-drunk recording we made laughing at each other late at night, and I deleted them one by one. Not in a burst of rage, not in a fit of emotional spiraling, but slowly, deliberately, as a form of emotional inventory, like I was closing drawers and locking them shut for good. Then I did the same with Jason. Years of sibling photos. Memories from holidays. Conversations we'd had during hard times. Gone. I blocked both of them. No warning. No goodbye message. No, I'm done with you. Just silence. I didn't owe them the privilege of my pain. Let them wonder. Let them look for signs of anger or hurt. Let them check their phones and find nothing. That, to me, was more satisfying than any dramatic outburst ever could have been. Of course, it didn't take long for the facade to start. Jason tried to text me a few days later like nothing had happened, just a casual, "Hey, hope you're doing good. Haven't seen you around. Let's catch up." The kind of message you send when you're testing the water, trying to see if the bomb you dropped actually exploded or if you got away clean. I didn't reply. I didn't even open it. I let the read receipt stay blank like a gravestone. Then Sophie messaged me a week after that. I just wanted to say I hope we can still be friends. I never meant to hurt you. Jason told me everything, and I feel awful. That was the first time I realized how deep the manipulation had gone. Jason told me everything. Not you. Not us. Not our story. Jason told her what to think, how to feel, what to say. It was like I'd been erased from my own experience and replaced with his version of me, some cold, detached, emotionally unavailable sibling who didn't care about her, who never intended anything real. I left her message unanswered too. Not because I hated her, though I wanted to, but because I needed her to understand that she'd made a choice. She chose to believe the version of me that Jason painted over the version she'd experienced firsthand. She let him rewrite the connection we had, and once you do that, once you hand the pen to someone else and let them draw your conclusions for you, I don't know how you expect to be trusted again. People think revenge has to be loud, that it has to look like screaming in public or destroying someone's life in some grand, cinematic way. But I've always believed the worst kind of punishment is indifference, the kind that makes someone realize you've taken back every piece of yourself they used to have access to and locked it behind a door they'll never be able to open again. So I kept living. Quietly. Distantly. I removed myself from a collaborative project Sophie was overseeing, no explanation, just a polite withdrawal. I skipped Jason's birthday dinner, even though our parents begged me to show. I gave up my spot at a family weekend trip, just so I wouldn't have to be in the same room. And every single time I said no, every time I declined or didn't answer or walked away without looking back, I could feel the impact landing. Not immediately, but enough to leave a mark. Because here's the thing no one tells you about people like Jason, they thrive off reaction. Off spectacle. Off knowing they've hurt you deeply enough that you can't help but lash out. And when you take that power away, when you meet their chaos with silence, they don't know what to do. They flail. They spin. They start unraveling all on their own. And Sophie? I think part of her expected me to beg her to come back. To explain myself. To fight for her. But I wasn't going to fight for someone who couldn't even recognize the truth of how I felt without someone else twisting it into a joke. I didn't owe her a second chance. I owed myself peace. And that peace came with walking away. What's funny is, even after all that, part of me still thought maybe they'd just move on. Maybe their little romance would blossom and I'd eventually become some distant story they told, a bump in the road on their way to some picture-perfect future. But it didn't go like that. Because people like Jason don't know how to build anything real. And people like Sophie, when they finally realize they handed their heart to someone who never deserved it, start remembering who actually made them feel safe in the first place. So I stayed silent. I didn't watch. I didn't check their pages or ask around or keep tabs. I let them burn whatever bridge we had and walk across the ashes. But I meant it when I said this wasn't over. They just didn't know it yet. By the time the initial sting wore off, that sharp kind of betrayal that numbs you more than it cuts you, I had already become something different, not bitter exactly, but detached in a way that scared even me a little. Like I had managed to switch off an entire part of myself without warning, as if the entire ordeal with Jason and Sophie had flipped a lever in my brain that said, feel nothing, stay silent, and watch what happens when you're gone. And that's exactly what I did. I watched. Not obsessively, not with the kind of masochistic fixation that people assume comes with heartbreak, but with the slow, quiet curiosity of someone who wants to confirm a theory they already know is true. That people who build relationships on lies and betrayal will eventually destroy each other without any outside help. At first, it was what you'd expect, a flood of photos, tags, and thinly veiled captions that tried too hard to sound effortless, like the two of them were starring in a movie they hoped someone else was watching. The pictures were always too perfect, too staged, and too desperate to seem spontaneous. Brunch dates, matching drinks, late-night selfies with vague captions like, my person, or, when you know, the kind of surface-level romance that looks sweet if you don't know the rot underneath it. But I knew. I knew it wasn't built on anything real, and the more I saw, the more obvious it became that all of it was a performance, one curated not for each other, but for everyone else, especially me. They didn't tag me, of course. But Sophie kept following people we used to know together, probably hoping I'd catch a glimpse or that someone would pass the word along. And Jason? Well, he's always been someone who thrives on being envied. His whole identity is built around getting reactions, so I knew this little love story wasn't about love, it was about making sure I knew I'd lost something, even though I hadn't. I stopped checking their pages directly. I wasn't interested in torturing myself with updates I didn't ask for. But social media has a way of keeping you tethered to people long after you've cut them off in real life, especially when mutual friends, well-meaning or not, keep offering you windows into lives you deliberately close the curtains on. So I heard things. People talked. Casual mentions at work, friends sending screenshots without asking first, that kind of thing. And bit by bit, the cracks started to show. First, it was the shift in tone. The posts became less frequent. The captions shorter. Then Sophie stopped showing up altogether. No more selfies, no more us moments, no more shared posts. Jason's feed got darker, more aggressive, Gym photos with angry motivational quotes, cryptic stories about betrayal and loyalty, all the classic signs of someone whose control over the narrative is slipping. And I didn't say a word. I didn't reach out to anyone. I didn't make comments or ask questions. I just watched the performance unravel, the way you might watch a play fall apart when the actors forget their lines and the audience stops pretending to care. Then, one night, weeks after I thought the silence had settled for good, Sophie texted me. It came out of nowhere. Just a simple, "Hey, can we talk?" No context. No explanation. No apology. It didn't make me angry. It didn't even surprise me. If anything, it confirmed what I'd been waiting for. I stared at the message for a while, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew I wouldn't be saying anything at all. I left it on read. No response. No acknowledgement. Let her sit with the silence the same way she'd let me drown in confusion months earlier. And then, just like before, the messages started piling up. Slowly at first, one every few days, each one a little more vulnerable, a little more desperate. I miss you. I didn't know what he was doing. I made a mistake. At one point, she even called. I didn't answer. I watched the call ring out, let the voicemail icon pop up, then deleted it without listening. Because the truth is, I didn't need to hear what she had to say. I already knew what the message would be: regret. But regret doesn't rebuild trust. It doesn't erase the fact that she looked me in the eyes and told me she believed him, not me. And once you choose someone else's lie over my truth, I'm done fully, finally, and completely done. There's something satisfying, in a quiet way, about knowing that the very thing someone left you for has started to unravel in their hands. It's not about revenge, not in the traditional sense. It's about confirmation, that you weren't crazy, that your instincts were right, that the people who made you feel disposable are finally realizing what they threw away wasn't so easy to replace. But I still didn't respond. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I wanted her to sit with the weight of that silence, to feel it the way I did when she vanished without explanation, when she let someone else speak over me like I didn't even exist. Then, one night, much later, her name showed up on my phone at 2 in the morning. It wasn't a message this time. It was a missed call, followed by a voicemail. And for some reason, that time I listened. I don't even know why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe habit. Maybe some deeply buried part of me still hoping for a different story. Her voice was shaky, barely coherent. She sounded like she'd been crying for hours. She said, "I need to talk to you. Please. I messed up. Jason's not who I thought he was. I should have listened to you. I should have trusted you. I'm sorry." She hung up after that. No follow-up. No second message. And I sat there in the dark, phone in hand, listening to it on repeat like it might suddenly change into something else. But it didn't. It just stayed what it was: too little, way too late. I didn't call back. I didn't answer the next few messages that followed. I let her spin. Let her sit in it. Because as much as I wanted to believe there was still something left worth saving, I knew that any version of Sophie I once loved didn't exist anymore. Or maybe she never did. But even then, I wasn't prepared for what would happen next. Because a few days later, I got a call, not from Sophie, not from Jason, not from anyone I expected, but from an unknown number at a hospital. A nurse. She said Sophie was in the ICU. She said there had been an incident. And then she said something I'll never forget, no matter how hard I try. She's not speaking to anyone. Not family. Not friends. But she keeps whispering one name. Over and over. And then she said it. My name. And just like that, the silence I'd built started to crack. There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful or still, the kind that wraps around your chest and makes every breath feel just slightly too shallow, like your body knows something before your mind catches up. That's how I felt when I saw Sophie's name light up my phone at 2 in the morning. I wasn't asleep, hadn't been for hours, because even though I'd spent months pretending I'd moved on and buried everything deep enough that it couldn't find its way back to the surface, the truth was that sometimes my brain still played reruns when the world got quiet, flashing every detail across my mind like a projector I couldn't switch off. So when the screen lit up with her name, my first reaction wasn't shock. It was something colder. Something heavier. Something like dread laced with the guilt I didn't want to admit I still carried. I didn't answer the call. I just watched it ring until it stopped, then waited as the voicemail notification appeared, staring at it the same way you look at something you already know you're going to open, even though you pretend you're debating it. I listened. Her voice was barely a whisper, and it sounded like she was crying, not the dramatic kind of crying people do when they want attention, but that deep, guttural sobbing that sounds like it's been happening for hours before you hear it. Like someone who's been broken so many times they've stopped trying to hold the pieces together. She said, "I need to talk to you. I know I don't deserve it, and I know you probably hate me, but please, please don't ignore this. I made a mistake. Jason's not who I thought he was. I should have listened to you. I should have believed you. I don't know what else to do." She hung up after that, no more words, no dramatic ending, just silence, the same silence I'd given her months before, now echoing back like some kind of cosmic reversal. And for a long time, I just sat there, staring at my phone, waiting for some feeling to rush in and tell me what to do. Anger, maybe. Or satisfaction. Or even relief. But all I felt was exhausted, like I was too far past the point of reacting. It wasn't that I didn't care anymore, it was that I didn't know if caring would change anything. The next day, I ignored 2 more missed calls from her number, then another one from an unfamiliar number I assumed was Jason's. I didn't feel like hearing his voice. I didn't care what version of the truth he wanted to pitch now that his world was starting to crumble. Whatever performance he was preparing, he could save it for someone still willing to clap at the end. I had no interest in being the audience anymore. But the call that came later that evening was different. It wasn't Sophie. It wasn't Jason. It wasn't anyone from the past. It was a woman named Kendra, who identified herself as a nurse from the ICU. Her voice was calm, practiced, the kind of tone medical professionals use when they're trained to deliver devastating information in a way that won't immediately collapse the person on the other end of the phone. She said Sophie had been admitted the night before. She wouldn't say much, just that there had been a serious incident and that she was in critical but stable condition. Then she paused, not for effect, but because she didn't know how to explain the next part without making it sound stranger than it already was. "She hasn't spoken to anyone," the nurse said, voice softening. "Not her family, not friends. But she keeps whispering one name. Just one. Over and over." There was a long pause, but I already knew what was coming next, like it had been sitting in the back of my throat since the moment I'd first heard that voicemail the night before. "She keeps saying your name." I didn't respond right away. I think I muttered something like, "Okay," or maybe I just sat there in silence. The nurse asked if I could come in, not urgently, not like it was life or death, but with the quiet suggestion that maybe, for some reason, I was the only person she was asking for because, in that hospital bed, hooked up to whatever machines were keeping her stable, Sophie had reached some kind of clarity about who she trusted to see her like that. I told the nurse I'd think about it. And then I spent the next several hours doing exactly that, thinking, pacing, sitting with myself in a kind of mental tug-of-war between resentment and responsibility, trying to figure out if showing up would make me weak or if staying away would make me cruel. Because I didn't owe her anything, not really. I had been nothing but honest with her. I had given her every piece of myself I knew how to offer. And she chose to throw all of that away in favor of someone who twisted the truth to suit his own needs, someone who used her affection as a tool to get to me. Jason didn't just win her, he used her to win against me. And even though I had walked away from both of them without saying a word, that silence hadn't been free. It had cost me more than I let anyone see. But I also couldn't pretend that her voice hadn't shaken something loose in me. That I didn't still remember the way she looked at me that first night we met. That I hadn't spent months replaying conversations and moments, wondering where exactly it had all gone wrong and whether, in some parallel version of the story, it could have gone differently if only one person had chosen me instead of him. The next morning, I got in my car and drove to the hospital. I didn't tell anyone I was going. I didn't text Jason or call Sophie or post cryptic messages online like they did. I didn't even bring flowers. I just showed up. Quiet. Unannounced. Intentional. The receptionist gave me the room number after confirming I was the person she'd been asking for, and I made my way to the ICU wing without saying much, my heart pounding in that slow, steady rhythm that comes when you're not quite sure what you're walking into. But you know it matters more than you're ready to admit. Jason was sitting outside her room, slumped in one of those uncomfortable plastic chairs, looking 10 years older than the last time I'd seen him. He stood up when he saw me, opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand before he could say anything. "Don't," I said, my voice low and steady. "This isn't about you." I walked past him without another word, ignoring the way he deflated like someone had just taken all the wind out of him, and pushed open the door to Sophie's room, not knowing what I'd find, not knowing how I'd feel, but knowing that this, whatever this was, needed to happen before I could figure out what came next. And when I saw her lying there, pale and still, with wires and monitors humming quietly beside her, I felt something I didn't expect, not rage, not pity, but something like grief for a version of her that maybe never really had a chance to exist. Because when she opened her eyes, just barely, and looked at me like I was the first real thing she'd seen in days, I knew one thing for sure. This story wasn't over yet. There's something strange that happens when you walk into a room where someone you used to love lies unconscious, or almost unconscious, and you realize that, for all the distance and silence and damage between you, they have somehow carried your name in their mouth during moments you weren't even present to witness. It does something to your understanding of closure, because you start to realize that maybe closure isn't about slamming the door or writing the final sentence or getting the last word. Maybe it's just standing quietly in a hospital room, knowing that someone who wrecked you also remembered you when they had no one else left to reach for. The room was cold in that impersonal, medical way that makes everything feel sanitized and unreal, and the beeping of the machines was steady enough to dull any racing thoughts I might have had if I hadn't been staring at Sophie, trying to reconcile the version of her I remembered with the version of her lying in front of me now, pale, fragile, and still somehow beautiful in a way that made my throat tighten. She looked like someone who had run out of fight. There was no performance anymore. No defensive posture, no clever lines, no curated expressions meant to make anyone feel anything specific. What I saw instead was the raw aftermath of someone who had allowed herself to believe lies for too long and was now paying the price for it with every exhausted breath she took. She opened her eyes slowly, and when they met mine, there was no surprise in them, no panic, no dramatic gasp or whispered apology. There was only quiet recognition, the kind that passes between two people who know each other in a way most people never get to, a kind of wordless understanding that I didn't expect to hit me the way it did. I didn't know if she was still on something, medication, sedatives, maybe just the pure weight of fatigue, but her lips moved softly, and she said, "You came." And even though I hadn't planned to speak, even though I had walked into that room with the firm intention of simply seeing her and then walking away without getting pulled back into anything messy or unresolved, I found myself nodding, because the truth is that I had come. I had come even though I told myself I wouldn't, even though I had every reason not to, even though I knew that walking into that room was opening a door I had spent months trying to bolt shut. She tried to sit up, failed, and then settled into a whisper that made me lean in without thinking. She said I was wrong. About everything. About you. About him. I let him tell me who you were. I let him convince me I didn't matter to you. And I should have known better. Her voice cracked, and I could tell she wanted to say more, but her energy was gone, and there was something honest in her face that stopped me from shutting down completely. I didn't forgive her in that moment, but I also didn't hate her. What I felt was more complicated, heavier, something I didn't have a name for. I said, "You didn't just let him lie. You believed it. You believed him over me. And that's what broke me." She closed her eyes like she already knew that was coming, like she'd been waiting to hear it out loud, and when she opened them again, they were wet and glassy, but clear in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. "I know," she whispered. "I've been saying your name since they brought me in. I didn't want anyone else. Just you." I stood there for a while, not responding, not moving, just watching her lie there, and for the first time since this entire mess started, I realized that I didn't need anything else from her. Not more apologies, not explanations, not a promise to do better or some grand display of repentance. I had come there thinking I'd leave with some kind of justice or closure or validation, but what I actually found was a quiet sense of certainty, the understanding that while I couldn't change what happened, I could choose how to carry it going forward. I didn't hug her. I didn't sit down next to the bed or hold her hand or tell her that everything was going to be okay. I didn't lie to make her feel better or pretend we could go back to what we were before. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out the small envelope I had written weeks ago, a letter I had started back when the messages from her first began, something I never planned to give her, just something I wrote for myself to put the thoughts somewhere real. And I set it gently on the tray beside her bed. She looked at it like it might burn her, but she didn't ask what it was, and I didn't tell her. I just said, "This is the last thing I'll give you." As I turned to leave, the nurse was standing by the door, watching with a kind of quiet understanding that only someone who sees this kind of thing play out every day can offer. She said, softly, like she wasn't sure if it was her place, "She's only been saying one name. Yours. Since the minute she came in." I paused, nodded, and offered her a tired smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Tell her I heard her," I said. "That I came. That I listened. And that it's enough." And then I walked out. Jason was still in the hallway, looking like someone who didn't know whether to apologize or explode. He opened his mouth, but I didn't let him speak. I looked him straight in the eyes, not with anger, not with fear, but with a kind of finality that felt like a full stop. "She called for me," I said. "Not you." And I watched it hit him like a slap he never saw coming. He blinked, mouth still half open, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of saying anything else. I walked past him, down the hallway, through the sterile corridors and out into the open air, each step lighter than the last. Because in the end, I didn't scream or fight or get revenge in the way people expect. I didn't expose anyone. I didn't ruin lives or burn bridges in a blaze of fury. But I was the name she whispered when it mattered. I was the only one she called for when the lights went out and the truth came rushing in. And that, more than anything, was the closure I never thought I'd get. She said my name, not his. That was the only thing I needed to hear.